Good morning, OVV. As we just spent the weekend focusing on the Easter story and how Jesus makes it possible for us to be included into the family of God, I wanted to take some time with this devotion and focus on, okay, what does it mean going from here on out? What does it mean to live in the Christian life? And what things are we supposed to focus on? What does that mean? So in order to do that, I wanted to go to 1 Timothy 1:5. And just before we jump into it, Paul is going to reference a command. And when he's talking about the command here, he's talking about Timothy's calling to be part of the church and then to be an overseer and a pastor in the church. This is what the verse says. It says, "The goal of this command is love, which comes from a pure heart and a good conscience and a sincere faith." And Paul is writing to Timothy here, right? And he's been warning Timothy away from distractions, away from the speculations, away from the idle talk of false teachers and other people that he's been interacting with. He says, instead of being distracted by them, focus on what is important. Focus on love that comes from a pure heart, a good conscience, and a sincere faith. This is the core of Timothy's mission. This is what he's supposed to focus on. And the Christian life can be a pretty complex and complicated thing. On one level, it's complex and complicated, and on another, it's relatively simple. But life is complicated, and the gospel is supposed to affect every part of our life. And so, as we seek to apply the gospel to every single part of our life, that involves a lot of different questions, right? So if you're like me, some of the questions that run through your mind are like, okay, well, there's theological pieces that I want to further explore, right? What about the end times? And what about different atonement theories, right? I experience church structure questions like, well, how should we do services? What can we learn from other churches that are doing things differently? Why are they doing those differently? Why do they think different things maybe than I do? There's week-to-week questions that I run into. Like, how many church events should I do in a week? How many Bible studies should I go to? Is there a max number of Bible studies, or is there a minimum? Or how should I structure my week? There's family questions. Am I spending enough time with my family? Can my family tell that I love them by my actions? There's relational questions. Do I have a mentor relationship? Do I have deep, accountable friendships? Are there other relationships I should be keeping up? And there's just a whole flurry of other questions, and I could keep going, but my wife's head is going to explode if I keep doing that. And into all of these questions, I think Paul says, there is one thing to remember. There is one thing that is central. The goal of all of this is love that comes from a pure heart, a good conscience, and a sincere faith. And this doesn't get rid of all those other questions that kind of run through our brain as we think about the spiritual life and the Christian life. But one thing I think it does is I think it takes those questions and it moves those questions to the back burner. And it focuses us and it gives us room to breathe. Jesus said it this way: the greatest commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the second is to love your neighbor as yourself. And I think that what this means for us is that when we feel overwhelmed by the Christian life, or we maybe feel overwhelmed by all the ways that we fall short of being like Jesus, I think that it's at this point that we can fall back on this verse and we can say, I'm forgiven, I'm accepted into the family of God. Now, how can I love God and how can I love the people around me at this time? Because at the end of the day, that's really the central thrust. That's what it's all about. And then we can deal with all these other questions as they come up, and we can deal with them one at a time instead of letting them overwhelm us. The goal that we're aiming for is love that issues from a pure heart and a good conscience and a sincere faith.